Hey there, fitness enthusiasts and curious minds. Ever wondered about the magic behind shedding those stubborn layers of fat? Well, you're in for a treat because today's video is all about the fascinating journey your body takes when it decides to burn fat. Picture this, from inches or centimeters of excess fat to just a few millimeters, it's a wild transformation. We'll dive deep into the science of fat burning, exploring how fat is drawn out from cells and potentially incinerated in different areas. Buckle up as we debunk myths, explore the idea of targeted fat loss, and even reveal the ultimate exercise for blasting away those unwanted inches. When people talk about losing fat, they usually mean losing the fat just beneath the skin called subcutaneous fat. Sub means below and cutaneous means skin. So it's the fat right under your skin, and it can be quite thick, up to inches. This fat can hide muscles like the six-pack or the deltoid muscle. The main idea here is about looks. People want their muscles to show. If we can reduce the fat on top of the muscles, it allows the muscles to shine through more visibly, giving them a chance to stand out and look impressive. Let's break it down. When we talk about wanting less fat to show off our muscles, we're usually referring to subcutaneous fat, which is right under the skin. But hold on a sec, there's another player in the fat game called visceral fat. Now, visceral means it's hanging out around our internal organs. Picture the belly, there's the stomach, and further up, you've got the heart and lungs in their own little space. If we take a closer look at a body with lots of visceral fat, things get a bit tricky because this fat is like a thick layer around organs. Check out the fatty appendage hanging off the intestine. That's the greater momentum, and it gets chunky with visceral fat. Here's the surprise. Even the heart has its fair share of visceral fat around it. It might sound odd, but it's part of the deal. This kind of fat around your internal organs is sometimes called deep belly fat. As it builds up, it can push on your belly, making it bigger. Now, why does it matter? Well, this visceral fat is linked to some health issues like metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart problems. Understanding and dealing with this visceral fat is essential for our overall health. So it's not just about looking good, it's about feeling good on the inside too. When it comes to losing or burning fat, we'll explore two aspects. First, what actions can we take to stimulate fat loss? And second, the intriguing process happening within the adipose tissue during fat burning. Where does it all go? To grasp this, let's use exercise as an example. Imagine focusing on the quad muscles, those prominent muscles on the front thigh. As these muscles work during exercise, they need extra energy. Here's where it gets interesting. We can tap into fat stores for this energy. Whether it's the fat over the abdomen or around the shoulder, if we zoom in, we find a world of cells known as adipocytes or adipose cells within the fatty tissue. No surprise here, these cells store fat. And this fat exists as triglycerides, composed of glycerol bonded to 3 fatty acid chains. Before we can use this stored fat, we must break down these triglycerides. Enter the crucial enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, residing inside adipose cells. But this enzyme needs a nudge to get activated. When we exercise, specific chemicals like epinephrine, norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline, and cortisol come into play. These chemicals assist in activating hormone-sensitive lipase, initiating lipolysis, a fancy term for breaking down fats. Once these fats are broken down, the fatty acids are released into the bloodstream. Here's an interesting tidbit. Fatty acids don't mix well with water. Given that our blood is mostly water, these fatty acids need a ride with a protein, and that's where albumin steps in. Think of albumin as the taxi cab for fatty acids. Now in the bloodstream, these fatty acids can circulate and reach their destination, our hard-working quadriceps. As they travel through the bloodstream, some fatty acids may enter the femoral artery, branching off into the working quadriceps. So essentially, when we exercise, we trigger a chain reaction, breaking down stored fats into fatty acids, giving them a ride in the albumin taxicab, and delivering them to the muscles in need. Understanding this process unveils the mystery of where fat goes during the journey of burning it off. Let's break down what's happening inside our bodies when we lose fat in simpler terms. Once the fatty acids reach the quadriceps, our muscle fibers take them in and channel them into the mitochondria to create ATP, which is like the energy currency for our cells. This process is called aerobic metabolism and requires oxygen. Fats are only metabolized aerobically, while glucose, a type of sugar from carbohydrates, can be metabolized both with and without oxygen. Now, let's compare the energy yield from glucose and fatty acids. When we metabolize glucose with oxygen, we can get about 32 to 36 ATP, which is the energy unit from one glucose molecule. On the other hand, A common fatty acid like palmitic acid can yield almost 113 ATPs. Sounds like a win for fats, right? Well, there's a catch. Using fat for energy involves a few steps. We need to pull it from storage, get it into the bloodstream, and transport it to the muscles or cells that will use it. This process takes time, around 10 to 20 minutes to really kick in during exercise. Plus, muscles don't store a lot of fat. In contrast, muscles are excellent at storing glucose in the form of glycogen, which is readily available and faster to break down, even though it doesn't produce as much ATP per molecule as fat. So why don't we always use fat for energy? The logistics and time it takes for fat to be ready for use make it less practical for quick bursts of energy. This is where carbohydrates, like glucose, come in handy. They're stored in the muscle, ready to be used instantly. From an exercise perspective, relying on fat takes time to gear up, while glucose is quick to access. Now let's connect the dots. As we consistently pull fatty acids from adipose cells, these cells shrink, causing the overall tissue to thin out. This contributes to the reduction of body fat, making it easier to spot those fantastic skeletal muscles. Understanding this process gives us insights into how our body transforms during the journey of losing fat. Applying the principles discussed earlier to visceral fat, we can similarly extract fatty acids from this internal fat, reducing its overall presence within body cavities. However, a common question in the realm of fat loss is whether exercise choices allow us to control where the fat is pulled from. For instance, some wonder if focusing on abdominal exercises like crunches could make the body preferentially draw fat from the belly area to enhance the visibility of the rectus abdominis muscle. Unfortunately, there's no consistent evidence supporting this notion. Engaging in specific exercises, such as glute exercises, with the hope of directing fat loss from a particular region appears to be a misconception. While building muscle through exercises like crunches can increase visibility due to muscle hypertrophy, it doesn't mean the body selectively pulls fat from a designated area. The key takeaway is that consistent overall fat loss is crucial, making muscles more visible as the body fat percentage decreases. It's not about pinpointing specific areas for fat loss, but achieving a holistic reduction. Now let's explore the idea of an optimal exercise for fat burning. Is there a specific exercise intensity or fat-burning zone that individual should adhere to for optimal fat loss? The answer depends on the interpretation of a fat-burning zone. While there is a range of exercise intensity where a higher percentage of fat is burned compared to carbohydrates, it's essential to consider the total amount of fat burned. For instance, exercising in a zone that burns a higher proportion of fats might seem advantageous for fat loss initially. However, we also need to assess the overall quantity of fat burned. Proportions matter, but the total fat burned is equally crucial. Therefore, the concept of a universally optimal fat-burning zone is nuanced, and the effectiveness of exercise for fat loss depends on various factors, including individual fitness levels and goals. It's essential to tailor exercise routines to personal preferences and capabilities rather than adhering strictly to a predefined fat-burning zone. Consider a scenario where we focus on the so-called fat-burning zone during a light exercise session, burning a total of 100 calories. In this session, 70% of the calories come from fats and only 30% from carbohydrates. Now, let's compare this to another session with higher intensity where, due to the increased demands, we shift our utilization from fats to carbohydrates. In this higher intensity session burning a total of 500 calories, 70% come from carbohydrates and only 30% from fat. While it may seem like we burned less fat in the higher intensity session, the actual fat burned is more substantial, 150 calories compared to the previous example's 70 calories. Now, let's address the notion of a perfect or best exercise for fat loss by considering various types of athletes. Examining runners, cyclists, basketball players, soccer players, tennis players, weightlifters, and even football wide receivers, we observe differences in muscular development. While certain sports may benefit from additional fat or weight in specific positions, the overall consensus is that different types of exercises contribute to varied muscular developments among athletes. The idea of a one-size-fits-all perfect exercise for fat loss remains complex, emphasizing the importance of tailoring exercise routines based on individual preferences, goals, and the specific demands of different sports. In simpler terms, different sports and exercises lead to various muscle changes. Some activities focus on building endurance without making muscles very big, while others make muscles grow in size. However, all athletes in these sports tend to have less extra fat on their bodies. This shows that there isn't just one perfect way to burn fat. Many ways can be successful, and the great thing about exercise is that we have lots of choices. The key is to pick exercises that you enjoy, as this makes it more likely for you to stick with them and succeed in losing fat. If you like long-distance running, that can help you lose fat. If you prefer intense training and intervals, that works too. Even weight training, or a mix of weight training and cardio, can be successful. Engaging in sports you love can also contribute to fat loss. Most data suggests that the focus shouldn't be so much on the proportion of fat versus carbs burned, but more on the total calories burned. While losing weight and fat can be challenging due to factors like genetics and age, we can control our calorie intake and expenditure. If we burn more calories than we consume, we have a good chance of losing fat and weight. Once we reach a satisfying point, we can adjust our inputs and outputs accordingly. Understanding how the body burns fat is essential. While we often think about losing fat, it's also beneficial to fatten up our brains with new knowledge. What do you think? Share with us down in the comments section. Be sure to subscribe and activate the notifications bell. Thank you for watching.